I had been away for only 2 weeks, yet it felt like years. The hospital walls had swallowed my days, endless white corridors, and the faint smell of antiseptic clinging to my skin. I was eager to come home, to sink back into the comfort of my bed, the only place that had ever truly felt like mine. The thought of resting in familiar surroundings had kept me strong through the endless needles, the tests, and the quiet nights of pain. The cab pulled up in front of the house just as the sun was setting. The sky blazed with orange and crimson, colors too alive for the weariness inside my body. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the door handle. 2 weeks was not long, but when your body fights against itself, time stretches and bends, leaving you drained. I whispered to myself, home. That single word tasted of safety, of belonging, of something I thought could never be taken from me. The driver helped me with my bag, a small suitcase that felt heavier than it should. He gave me a kind smile, unaware of the battle I had fought. Inside sterile hospital rooms, I thanked him softly and turned toward the house. The curtains were drawn, the porch light on. Everything appeared ordinary, but something in the air was different. I dismissed the thought, telling myself that illness had made me overly sensitive. When I stepped inside, the smell of lavender greeted me. For a moment, I smiled. My daughter knew I loved lavender. It calmed me when the world felt overwhelming. But as I moved farther into the hallway, the air shifted. There was laughter, faint and muffled, coming from upstairs. My heart lifted briefly. Perhaps she was happy. Perhaps the house had been filled with joy in my absence. Yet as I climbed the staircase, each step heavier than the last, that joy twisted into unease. The laughter did not belong to me. It was careless, carefree, unfamiliar in tone. I reached the landing, placed my hand on the door to my room, and pushed it open. My breath caught in my chest. The bed, the one I had chosen carefully years ago for its softness, was gone. The quilt my mother had stitched now vanished. The small framed photographs that had once rested on my nightstand were nowhere to be seen. Instead, there was a king-sized bed draped in a new cover, masculine shoes scattered near the dresser, and a pile of clothes that clearly did not belong to me. My sanctuary had been stripped of my presence. My room, the space that had seen my tears, my recovery from countless hardships, was no longer mine. I staggered forward, one hand clutching the doorframe for balance. A sharp ache pulsed in my chest. The laughter grew louder, and then I saw her, my daughter, standing with her husband, laughing as they placed a painting on the wall where my mirror used to hang. She turned, her smile fading when she saw me. For a moment, silence pressed against the walls. Only the sound of my suitcase hitting the floor broke it. "What is this?" My voice cracked, yet it carried enough strength to demand an answer. "Where are my things?" Her husband stepped forward, his hand casually resting on her shoulder, his stance almost territorial. "We thought you'd be at the hospital longer," he said, his tone flat, as if I were an unwelcome guest who had arrived too soon. "We needed more space." I stared at him, then at her. The girl I had raised, the one whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose midnight fevers I had soothed, stood in front of me with guilt flickering across her eyes but no apology on her lips. "You needed more space," I repeated, my words trembling. "This is my room, my home." She shifted uncomfortably, her hands clasping together. "Mom, we were going to talk to you. It was just easier this way. You have the guest room downstairs. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. The words slammed into me with the force of betrayal. My sanctuary, my memories, my not a big deal. I felt the ground beneath me tilt. All those long nights in the hospital, I had clung to the thought of this room, of returning to a space where I was safe. Now it had been stolen without warning. My voice grew steadier, colder. "Where are my things?" Her husband shrugged. "We boxed them up, put them in the garage. You'll find them there." The garage. My life reduced to cardboard boxes in a dusty corner, shoved aside to make room for their convenience. I looked at my daughter, searching her face for some sign of remorse, some flicker of the child who once clung to my hand in crowded streets, afraid to lose me. But she looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I just got out of the hospital," I said, my words sharp with disbelief. "Do you understand what I've been through? I came back hoping for comfort, and instead I walk into this." She opened her mouth to speak, but he cut her off. "You're making this dramatic. We're a family. Families adjust. You'll be fine." Something inside me snapped. I had been patient, understanding, forgiving all my life. But in that moment, as I stood in the doorway of what used to be my room, I realized this was more than thoughtlessness. This was erasure. They had erased me from my own home. I stepped back into the hallway, my suitcase still by the door. My knees trembled, but I straightened my spine. I will not be treated as an intruder in my own house, I said, my voice, steady now, iron beneath the exhaustion. This is not over. I turned and walked downstairs, every step heavy yet deliberate. In the guest room, the bed was neatly made, a space prepared for someone temporary, someone passing through. That was how they saw me now, a visitor, no longer the heart of this home. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I had fought so hard to stay alive in that hospital, clinging to the thought of home. And now, the very people I had lived for had stolen it from me. As night fell, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Laughter still echoed faintly from upstairs, each sound a reminder that my place had been taken. My daughter had moved in with her husband, not just into my room, but into the space of my dignity, my belonging. And I knew then, with a clarity that cut sharper than any pain, that this was only the beginning. Something was broken, and it would not mend easily. I closed my eyes, but sleep refused to come. Instead, questions circled endlessly in my mind. How long had they planned this? Did they wait for me to leave, knowing I would not resist while hooked up to IVs and machines? Had my daughter chosen her husband's comfort over her mother's survival? The ache in my chest was not just from illness, it was from betrayal, deep enough to shake the foundation of my heart. I promised myself one thing, as I lay in that cold, unfamiliar bed. I would uncover the truth. I would reclaim my place, not just in this house, but in the story of my own life. They thought they could push me aside quietly, but they had underestimated me. My silence had ended the moment I opened that door. From here on, every step I took would lead me closer to the truth, no matter how painful it was to face. The morning after my return, I rose from the stiff bed in the guest room with a heaviness that had nothing to do with illness. My body ached, but the ache inside my chest was sharper, born from betrayal rather than recovery. Sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains, casting dull patterns on the floor. This room was never meant to be mine. It smelled of dust and forgotten guests, not of the lavender I loved, not of me. I sat up slowly, listening to the faint stirrings upstairs. Their laughter had ceased with the night, replaced now by the sound of footsteps and hushed conversations. My daughter's voice mingled with her husband's, low and muffled, yet I could hear the rhythm of their comfort. Comfort purchased at the expense of my displacement. The weight of their decision pressed down on me, but I knew I could not linger in self-pity. I had to see for myself what they had done with my life, the pieces of me that had been boxed away like old furniture. Gathering what little strength I had, I slipped into my slippers and made my way toward the garage. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee. I paused, considering entering the kitchen to greet them, to demand an explanation again. But I knew the answer already. The true confrontation would not come from words over breakfast. It would come from the sight of my belongings, in whatever state they had left them. The garage door creaked as I pulled it open. A chill met me, the kind that seeped into your bones. Dust floated in the thin beams of light from a small window near the ceiling, and there, stacked in uneven piles, were the boxers. My breath caught as I stepped closer. Each box bore the marks of careless hands. Some flaps gaped open, tape hastily applied, corners bent and crushed. The handwriting scrawled across them was not my daughter's neat script, it was his. His broad, impatient strokes labeled my life: clothes, books, miscellaneous, my existence reduced to categories without sentiment. I knelt by the nearest box, my knees protesting the motion. With trembling fingers, I pried it open. Inside lay my dresses, folded poorly, creased in ways they had never been before. I lifted one, the pale blue gown I had worn to my daughter's graduation. A day filled with pride, tears, and the feeling that all my sacrifices had been worth it. Now it lay wrinkled, tossed aside as if it were nothing more than fabric. Another box revealed my books, their spines bent, pages crumpled. I picked up the old volume of poetry my late husband had given me on our 10th anniversary. The inscription on the first page, written in his delicate hand, blurred as my tears fell. This was not storage. This was exile. This was exile. The most painful blow came when I opened the box labeled miscellaneous. Inside were the photographs, family albums, loose pictures, frames with glass cracked from rough handling. I held one photograph in particular, my daughter at 5 years old, perched on my lap, grinning with missing teeth, my arms wrapped around her, my smile wide despite the exhaustion of raising her alone after her father's death. That photograph had once sat proudly on my nightstand, a reminder of why I kept going. Now it was buried in a box like discarded junk. A sound behind me made me turn sharply. My daughter stood at the door, her expression caught between guilt and defensiveness. "Mom," she began softly, stepping into the garage, "I was going to help you sort through these today." I clutched the photograph tightly, my voice trembling with anger I could no longer suppress. "Sort through? These are my life, my memories. Do you have any idea what it felt like to come home and find my room stripped bare, everything shoved into this cold, dusty place?" Her eyes flickered, but she did not approach. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just needed the space. You were in the hospital, and we thought you thought what?" I cut her off, my voice rising, that I would not come back, that I would not notice if everything that mattered to me was thrown into boxes like trash. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced back toward the house, as if worried her husband would overhear. "He said it was practical. We needed to settle in properly. He said you'd understand." I laughed bitterly, the sound foreign even to my own ears. Understand? I nearly died in that hospital, clinging to the thought of coming home, of finding comfort in my own room. And this is what I returned to my daughter standing by while her husband erases me. Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not speak. Instead, she turned and left the garage, the door swinging shut behind her. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. I sank to the floor, the photograph still in my hand, and let the tears fall freely. But beneath the grief, a spark of determination flickered. This was not just carelessness. This was a test, a boundary they had crossed to see how far they could push me. And I knew now that if I did not stand firm, they would push me further still. I wiped my eyes and carefully repacked the photograph, setting it aside with quiet reverence. Then I began to sort through the boxes methodically, pulling aside what mattered most, refusing to let their neglect diminish the value of my memories. Each object I touched was a piece of me they had tried to bury, and with each one I reclaimed. My resolve grew stronger. By the time the afternoon sun slanted through the garage window, I had created a small corner for myself, a pile of items that would not be left in the shadows. They would not strip me of my history so easily. As I stood, weary but resolute, I heard footsteps again. This time it was him. He entered the garage with the air of someone inspecting his territory. His eyes flicked over the boxes, then landed on me. "You're making a mess," he said casually, as if I were a child caught rummaging through things I did not own. My jaw tightened. "These are my belongings, my memories. You had no right to move them without my permission." He smirked, a cold curve of his lips. "It's all the same. Boxes or shelves. What difference does it make? You have a place to sleep. Be grateful." The audacity of his words stunned me into silence for a moment. Grateful. As though being stripped of dignity and displaced from my own room was a favor. I straightened, meeting his gaze without flinching. "This house is mine. Do not mistake kindness for weakness. I will not be erased." For the first time, his smirk faltered. He muttered something under his breath and left, slamming the door behind him. I stood alone once more, but the silence no longer felt like defeat. It felt like the beginning of a battle I was determined to win. They thought I would return from the hospital too weak to fight, too weary to care. They were wrong. That night, as I lay again in the guest room, I held the photograph against my chest. My daughter's innocent smile stared back at me, a reminder of the bond we once shared. I wondered how much of her was left beneath the influence of the man she had chosen. Sleep eluded me, but instead of despair, my mind brimmed with resolve. They had turned my home into a battlefield. I would not retreat. I would gather my strength. I would watch. I would listen. And when the time came, I would show them that the woman they thought could be pushed aside was far stronger than they imagined. The boxes in the garage had not broken me. They had awakened me. And in that awakening, I knew this story was only beginning. The third night after my return was colder than the others. The guest room walls pressed in on me like a cage. No matter how many blankets I pulled over myself, the chill refused to leave. It was not the kind of cold that crept in from outside, but the kind that came from within, born of loneliness and unease. The house, my house, no longer embraced me. Instead, it rejected me, as though I were a stranger trespassing in spaces that once belonged to me. I could hear them upstairs. Their footsteps moved across the floorboards above my ceiling, steady, deliberate. Occasionally, their voices carried down through the thin walls. I could not make out every word, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the hushed rhythm of plotting, the cadence of people who spoke of things they did not want others to hear. I turned to the wall, pressing my ear against the cool plaster. Fragments of conversation reached me. "She will not resist if we stay firm," he said, his voice low, commanding. "She looked hurt today," my daughter whispered back, her words fragile, uncertain. "I do not know if this is right." "She has no choice," he replied quickly. "She is weak, still recovering. This is the only way forward." The words stung. Weak. That was how he saw me. And worse, my daughter, the child I had raised with such care, did not argue. Her silence was an agreement more painful than any spoken word. I pulled away from the wall, my heart pounding. Questions swirled in my mind. What were they planning? Why was my daughter allowing herself to be led by him, even against the bond we once shared? I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to their muffled voices continue late into the night. Sleep never came. The next morning, I rose early, determined to see for myself what secrets they thought they could keep. I moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake them. The kitchen was spotless, unnaturally so, as if prepared for guests. A stack of envelopes sat neatly on the counter. Curiosity drew me closer. The top envelope was addressed not to me, but to both of them. Written in bold letters, "Congratulations on your new home." My breath caught. New home. I slipped the card from its envelope, my hands trembling. Inside, the message was clear: "Wishing you joy and comfort in this new chapter together." The sender's name meant nothing to me, but the implication was unmistakable. They had told someone, perhaps many, that this was their house now, their space, their beginning. I replaced the card quickly, heart racing, and turned at the sound of footsteps behind me. My daughter stood in the doorway, her expression startled, as if she had caught me committing a crime. "What are you doing up so early?" she asked, her tone laced with suspicion. "I could not sleep," I answered truthfully, keeping my voice calm. "This is still my home. I walk through it as I please." Her eyes flicked to the envelopes, and for a moment, panic crossed her face. She gathered them quickly, holding them to her chest. "You should not be snooping." I held her gaze, unflinching. "Snooping? Or discovering what you chose not to tell me? When were you going to explain why people are congratulating you for taking over my home?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Guilt colored her face, yet she turned away, retreating toward the stairs. I did not follow. The truth had begun to show itself, and it was far darker than I had feared. Later that day, I ventured again into the garage. My boxers remained stacked, though I had pulled many items aside. As I sorted through another box, I found a folder I did not recognize. Inside were papers, legal papers. I scanned them quickly, my pulse quickening. My daughter's name and her husband's appeared together, alongside references to property transfers and signatures I did not remember giving. My stomach twisted. Had they forged something? Or had I signed unknowingly during my time in the hospital, weakened and confused by medication? The door creaked open again, and I hastily tucked the folder beneath other belongings. My daughter appeared, holding a tray of tea. Her eyes avoided mine as she set it down. "You should rest more," she said softly. "The hospital stay took so much out of you." I looked at her carefully, studying the woman she had become. "Do you ever think of the woman who raised you alone, who sacrificed everything to keep this roof over your head? Do you think she deserves to be pushed aside like this?" Her eyes glistened, but she shook her head. "Mom, it is not like that. We are just trying to build a future, together, at the cost of destroying mine." My voice trembled, but it held steel. She turned and left before I could say more, her silence echoing louder than any denial. That evening, I sat alone in the guest room, the folder hidden beneath my bed. The laughter upstairs returned, but I no longer listened as a wounded mother. I listened as someone preparing for battle. They believed I was weak. They believed I would yield. They were wrong. They were wrong. As the night deepened, I rose quietly and stepped into the hallway. The house was silent, their lights dimmed. I moved carefully, each step deliberate, until I reached the door to my old room. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Their breathing told me they were asleep. Slowly, I turned the knob and slipped inside. The sight of my daughter lying peacefully beside him, her face softened in slumber, struck me with conflicting emotions. Love and fury warred within me. I wanted to shake her awake, to demand answers, to remind her of every sacrifice I had made. But I held back. This was not the moment for confrontation. This was the moment for discovery. I searched quietly, my eyes scanning the room that had once been mine. In the drawer of the nightstand, beneath scattered papers, I found another envelope. Inside was a letter addressed to a lawyer. Words leaped out at me. Transfer, inheritance, ownership. My head spun. They were not only trying to take my room, they were laying claim to everything I had built, everything I had hoped to leave as a legacy. I replaced the envelope carefully, retreating from the room before my trembling hands betrayed me. Back in the guest room, I sat on the bed, clutching the folder and the knowledge I had gathered. My daughter and her husband were not merely thoughtless, they were deliberate, calculated, and they had underestimated me. I whispered into the silence of the night, not as a plea but as a vow. You will not succeed. For the first time since leaving the hospital, I felt a spark of strength ignite inside me. My body was frail, yes, but my spirit was not broken. They had declared war, in whispers and secret papers. I would answer in ways they did not expect. The battle for my home had begun. By the fourth day, the air inside my home had grown thick with tension. Every hallway felt narrower, every glance sharper. I knew I could not linger in quiet discovery any longer. To let their whispers and secret papers pile up was to invite them to strip away everything I had built. If there was going to be a confrontation, it would come on my terms, not theirs. That afternoon, I decided we would have dinner together. Not the casual, rushed meals where I sat in silence while they carried on as if I were invisible, but a proper dinner where truth would be served alongside the food. I spent the day moving slowly, my body still aching from recovery, but my determination gave me strength. I took out pots and pans from the cupboards, laying them across the counter, as though I were preparing for battle. In a way, I was when my daughter entered the kitchen and saw me at the stove. Her eyes widened. Mom, you should not be standing this long. You should be resting. I stirred the pot of stew, the familiar scent of herbs filling the room. I have rested enough. Tonight we will sit together as a family. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to object, but she stopped herself. She nodded stiffly and left without another word. Soon, the sound of her husband's voice drifted from the living room. He seemed amused when she told him of my plan. I heard the low rumble of his laughter, a sound that grated against my heart, but I ignored it. Let him laugh. He had no idea what I intended. By the time the sun set, the table was set neatly, each plate in its place, candles flickering between dishes. The aroma filled the air, pulling at memories of the many nights I had cooked for my daughter as she grew up, nights when she would chatter about her day at school, and I would listen with pride. Those memories felt distant now, almost like they belonged to another life. When they finally came to the table, I greeted them with a calm smile. My daughter looked uneasy, shifting in her chair, while her husband leaned back with an air of superiority. He had not yet realized this would not be an ordinary meal. We ate in silence at first, the clinking of silverware the only sound. Then, I spoke, my voice steady. I found something in the garage, I said, my eyes fixed on my daughter. Legal papers, transfers, signatures I do not remember giving. She froze, her fork hovering in the air. He, however, did not flinch. He set his utensil down with deliberate calm and met my gaze. You should not have been rummaging through things that do not concern you, he said. I narrowed my eyes. Everything in this house concerns me. This is my home. You do not get to decide what I see or what I do. My daughter shifted uncomfortably. Mom, please, let us not do this now. No, I said firmly. We will do this now. I want answers. Why are people congratulating you on your new home? Why are lawyers involved? Why am I finding documents with my name that I never agreed to? Her eyes filled with tears, but still she did not speak. It was him who answered. Because this house cannot stay frozen in the past forever, he said coolly. You have had your time. You are old, you are sick, and you cannot manage this place on your own anymore. We are simply preparing for the future. My hands clenched tightly around my glass. You mean you are preparing to steal from me, to erase me before I am even gone? It is not stealing if it is inevitable, he replied with a smirk. Eventually, everything would pass to her. We are only speeding up what is already meant to happen. I turned to my daughter, my voice breaking. Is that how you see it too? That I am nothing more than a burden to move aside, that my home, my life, is just yours to claim while I am still breathing. Her face crumpled with guilt. She shook her head weakly, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mom, I never wanted to hurt you. I thought maybe this was for the best. For the best. My voice rose, shaking with fury. For whose best? Certainly not mine. I nearly died in that hospital, clinging to the thought of coming back here, to the room I built with my own hands, to the memories I made in every corner, and you let him strip it all away as if I were already dead. The silence that followed was suffocating. My daughter covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. But he remained unmoved, his gaze hard and unyielding. You are making this harder than it has to be, he said finally. We are giving you a place to stay, food to eat. You should be grateful instead of fighting us. The word grated against me again. Grateful. It was the same word he had used before, the same weapon he wielded to turn my kindness into weakness. But this time, I did not let it strike me down. I leaned forward, my voice low but fierce. You may think you have control, but you underestimate me. I built this home from nothing. I raised my daughter alone, through sacrifice you cannot begin to imagine, and I will not sit quietly while you strip it from me. If you think I am too weak to fight, you are gravely mistaken. For the first time, I saw a flicker of unease cross his face. It vanished quickly, replaced by arrogance, but I had seen it, and that was enough to give me strength. The rest of the dinner passed in tense silence. My daughter barely touched her food, her sobs quieting to soft sniffles. He ate slowly, deliberately, as if trying to prove he was unshaken. But the atmosphere had shifted, the unspoken war had been dragged into the open, and we all knew it. When the dishes were cleared, I retreated to the guest room, my hands still trembling. I sat on the bed, staring at the folder hidden beneath it. The papers were proof of their betrayal, but proof alone was not enough. I needed to act. I needed to reclaim what was mine before it was too late. As the night deepened, I heard them upstairs again. Their voices carried through the floorboards, sharp and urgent this time. My daughter's sobs mingled with his angry tones. She is not supposed to resist like this, he hissed. You need to stand with me. If she refuses, we will find another way. I cannot, she cried. She is my mother. I cannot destroy her like this. You already have, he snapped. Do not forget who makes decisions in this house now. My heart broke at her words, yet the anger inside me only grew. They were unraveling, and in their unraveling, I saw my chance. He believed he could dictate, manipulate, and threaten his way into control. But his arrogance would be his undoing. That night, as I lay awake in the dark, I made a vow to myself. I would not only fight back, I would expose him for what he truly was. My daughter might be blind now, but one day she would see, and when she did, she would know that her mother did not bow to betrayal. The dinner that broke the silence had lit the fire. Now the battle would burn. The morning after that tense dinner, the house felt different. The silence was no longer just heavy, it was hostile. The walls that had once been my comfort seemed to lean in with judgment, pressing against me as if asking how I could allow strangers, my own daughter and her husband, to claim authority here. I woke early. Though sleep had been scarce, my body still ached from the hospital, but I forced myself to sit up. Weakness was exactly what he wanted me to embrace. I would not give him that satisfaction. When I stepped into the kitchen, I found him already there, sipping coffee as though he were the master of the home. He looked up, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. You should not push yourself, he said smoothly. Stress will only send you back to the hospital. I poured myself a cup of tea, ignoring the sting of his words. It is funny, I replied, how concerned you sound when your actions prove otherwise. His lips curved into a smile that did not reach his eyes. I only speak the truth. You are fragile. It is time you accept that others must handle what you no longer can. I met his gaze, steady and unwavering. Do not mistake recovery for fragility. I am not finished yet. I left the room before he could reply, but my heart was racing. He had drawn his battle lines, and so had I. That afternoon, when my daughter went out to run errands and he retreated to his office upstairs, I finally had the moment I needed. I slipped into the garage once again, pulling out the folder of legal papers I had discovered. My hands shook as I examined the documents more closely. Property transfer drafts, power of attorney forms, even bank account information, all with my daughter's name intertwined with his. But one page chilled me most of all. It was a draft letter, typed neatly, with space for my signature. At the bottom it declared that I was willingly handing over full ownership of the property to my daughter and her husband, citing my declining health and inability to manage affairs. Declining health, inability, words they were already trying to weave into truth. I knew then that I could not face this battle alone. If I wanted to fight back, I needed knowledge, and knowledge meant finding help beyond these walls. The next day, I pretended to need fresh air. My daughter hesitated when I mentioned walking to the nearby park, but she did not stop me. Perhaps she thought I was too weak to go far, or perhaps she believed I would not dare. Either way, I left the house with purpose. The autumn wind brushed against my face as I walked, my cane tapping rhythmically against the pavement. Every step reminded me that my body had limits, but my spirit pressed me forward. I reached the corner, then turned not toward the park but toward the bus stop. It took longer than I remembered, but eventually I found myself standing before the small law office I had once passed countless times. The name on the sign was unfamiliar, but that did not matter. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The receptionist looked up, surprised at the sight of me. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said firmly, "but I need to speak to someone. It is important." Minutes later, I was sitting across from a young lawyer named Mr. Grant. His office smelled of fresh paper and ink, and his desk was neatly arranged, though I noticed the kindness in his eyes outweighed the sterility of the space. "How can I help you?" he asked gently. I laid the folder on his desk, my hands trembling slightly as I pushed it toward him. "I believe my daughter and her husband are trying to take my home from me. These are the papers I found." He opened the folder, scanning quickly. His expression darkened as he read. "These are serious," he said finally. "If they are attempting to coerce you into signing, or if they have already forged documents, this is fraud, possibly even elder abuse." The words cut deep, but they also gave me clarity. Elder abuse, fraud. These were not just betrayals of trust, they were crimes. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice quiet but steady. He leaned forward. "First, do not sign anything, not a single paper, no matter what they say. Second, we need to secure proof of their intent. Conversations, documents, anything that shows they are pressuring you. Do you feel safe in your home?" The question lingered in the air. Did I feel safe? My body told me no, but my resolve told me I could not leave. "I need to be there," I answered. "I need to see this through." He nodded slowly. "Then we will make a plan. I will prepare protective measures. If they try to push anything legally, we will be ready. In the meantime, gather whatever evidence you can." Relief washed over me, though it was tempered with fear. I was no longer alone. I had someone who understood, someone who could give shape to the battle I was preparing to fight. When I returned home, the house felt even heavier than before. He was waiting in the living room, his eyes narrowing as I walked through the door. "Out for a long walk," he said, his tone edged with suspicion. "Yes," I replied evenly. I needed the air. His gaze lingered on me, searching for weakness, but I offered none. He eventually looked away, though I knew he did not believe me. That night, I tucked the lawyer's business card deep into my pocket, close to my heart. It was more than a piece of paper. It was a weapon, a reminder that I had allies beyond these walls. The following days were a test of endurance. My daughter tried to soften the edges of our conflict, bringing me tea, asking after my health, as if kindness could erase the betrayal. I wanted to believe her remorse was real, but every time I looked at her, I remembered the tears at the dinner table and the silence that followed. He, however, grew sharper. His comments carried more weight, his presence more oppressive. One evening, as I sat in the living room, he stood over me, his voice low. "You should not fight what is already decided. You will only make this harder on yourself." I looked up at him, my heart pounding but my expression calm. "Nothing is decided, not while I still have breath." For a moment, anger flashed in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with a smile. "We will see," he said as he walked away. I knew he was beginning to sense the truth, that I was not as powerless as he had hoped. One night, as the house settled into uneasy quiet, I began my own careful work. One retrieved an old tape recorder, from one of my boxers in the garage. It was dusty, its batteries corroded, but after some cleaning, it sparked back to life. I placed it beneath the couch cushions in the living room, where he often made his calls. If he continued to speak carelessly, I would have what I needed. The next day proved my instincts correct. As I pretended to nap in the guest room, his voice drifted from the living room. "She is more stubborn than I expected," he said into the phone. "But it does not matter. She cannot keep this up forever. Once we have the papers, it will all be ours." My chest tightened, but a flicker of triumph burned within me. His arrogance had given me exactly what I needed. When the call ended, I retrieved the recorder, my hands shaking as I rewound the tape. His voice filled the room, clear and damning. I pressed the recorder to my chest, whispering a silent vow. This was just the beginning. That night, as I lay awake, I realized the path ahead would not be easy. They would push harder, and he would grow more desperate. But I was no longer afraid. I thought of the lawyer's words, of the proof I now held in my hands, and I felt strength rise within me. They had underestimated me, blinded by their greed. They saw only weakness where resilience had taken root. First step toward war had been taken, and I would not stop until I reclaimed everything that was mine. The recorder lay hidden beneath my pillow, a small device that carried a voice capable of tearing down the lies around me. I replayed it in my mind countless times that night, the sharp tone of his arrogance, the way he declared victory as if my home was already his. Each time, I felt the fire inside me grow stronger, but proof meant little if it stayed buried. At some point, I would have to use it, and that thought weighed heavily on me. My daughter was still trapped in the web he had spun, her guilt battling with her loyalty to him. I could not simply throw accusations at her without something she could not deny. The question was, when and how? The following morning, I found her alone in the kitchen. Her eyes were puffy, her cheeks blotched as though she had been crying all night. She did not notice me at first as she poured water into a kettle, her hands trembling. "Good morning," I said softly. She startled, nearly spilling the water. "Mom, you scared me." I stepped closer, studying her face. "You did not sleep well." She avoided my gaze, setting the kettle on the stove. "I am fine, just tired." I reached out, touching her arm gently. "You are not fine. He has put you in an impossible place, has he not?" At those words, her eyes filled with tears. She shook her head quickly, as if denying it would make it true. "Please do not start. Mom, I cannot talk about this." Her voice cracked on the last word, and my heart ached. I wanted to hold her, to shield her from the man she had chosen, but I also knew comfort alone would not free her. "I do not want to start an argument," I said quietly. "I only want you to remember that I see you. You are my daughter. No matter what he says, no matter what you think you owe him, I will never stop being your mother." Her tears spilled over, and she turned quickly, pretending to busy herself with mugs on the counter. "I know," she whispered. "I know." Before I could say more, he entered the room. His presence filled the kitchen like a storm cloud, wiping away the fragile moment we had shared. "What is going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp. "Nothing," she answered quickly, wiping her face. "Just making tea." He looked between us, his eyes narrowing. "Make sure you drink it in the living room. I want to talk to you later." She nodded, her shoulders hunched, and hurried out. I remained where I stood, refusing to shrink under his gaze. When she was gone, he stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You will not turn her against me. Do you understand? Whatever game you think you are playing, it will end badly for you." I stared back at him, my voice steady. "It is not a game, it is my life, and if anyone is destroying her, it is you, not me." For the first time, his mask slipped, his lips tightened, his jaw clenched, and his eyes burned with fury. But he said nothing more. He turned sharply and left the room, his footsteps heavy against the floor. My heart pounded in my chest, but I felt no regret. His threats only confirmed what I already knew. He was afraid of losing control, and fear makes men reckless. That afternoon, I found myself alone again. My daughter had gone shopping, and he had locked himself in his office. I took the chance to retrieve the recorder, holding it in my hands as though it were a fragile treasure. I replayed the recording, listening carefully to each word. His voice filled the room. "Once we have the papers, it will all be ours. Will all be ours." I closed my eyes, tears sliding down my cheeks. This was not how a son-in-law should speak of family. This was not how love should sound. For hours, I debated whether to show it to my daughter. Would she believe it? Would she finally see him for who he truly was? Or would she dismiss it, convinced I was twisting the truth? When she returned later that evening, carrying grocery bags, I offered to help. She looked surprised, almost guilty, but she allowed me to take a bag into the kitchen. As we unpacked the food, I made my choice. "I have something I want you to hear," I said quietly. Her hands stilled, a box of cereal halfway to the cupboard. "What is it?" I took a deep breath and retrieved the recorder from my pocket. I set it on the counter and pressed play. The sound of his voice filled the kitchen. My daughter froze, her eyes widening with every word. By the time the recording ended, her face was pale, her lips trembling. "Mom," she whispered, "where did you get this?" "I hid it in the living room," I admitted. "I needed proof of what he was doing, of what he planned. I needed you to see." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I knew he was pushing you. I knew he wanted this house, but I did not think he would speak like that. Now you know," I said gently. "He does not love you the way he should. He loves what you can give him, and he is willing to destroy me to get it." She covered her mouth with her hands, her body trembling. For a moment, I thought I had finally reached her, but then fear flickered in her eyes. "If he finds out you recorded him," she whispered, "he will lose control. He will do something terrible." "I am not afraid of him," I said firmly, "and you should not be either." She shook her head again, backing away. "I cannot. Not yet. Please, do not tell him about this, please." Her desperation cut deep, but I understood. She was trapped, torn between the man she loved and the mother she owed everything to. I could not force her to choose not yet. "All right," I said softly. "But remember, you cannot unhear what you just heard." She nodded weakly, wiping her tears, and hurried out of the kitchen. That night, he confronted me again. He must have sensed something had shifted, for his questions came sharp and sudden. "What did you talk to her about?" he demanded, standing in the doorway of my room. "Nothing you would care to know," I replied calmly, though my heart pounded. His eyes narrowed. "If you think you can drive a wedge between us, you are wasting your time. She will always choose me." I held his gaze. "We will see." His face darkened. "Do not test me. You are one mistake away from being taken out of this house for good." With that, he turned and slammed the door behind him. I sat on the bed, clutching the recorder once more. Fear gnawed at me, but it was no longer the paralyzing fear I had once felt. It was the kind of fear that sharpens resolve. He believed he had all the power, but his threats had only exposed his desperation. The days that followed were tense beyond measure. My daughter moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes red, her movements stiff. He grew more aggressive, his tone sharper, his presence more oppressive. I knew it was only a matter of time before he acted on his threats, but I was ready now. I had proof. I had allies outside this house, and I had a fire inside me that no threat could extinguish. Began writing down everything, every word he said, every action he took, every time my daughter cried when she thought no one was watching. Each note was a piece of the puzzle, each detail another brick in the wall I was building against him. I was no longer simply surviving in my own home. I was preparing for battle, and though my daughter's tears broke my heart, I held on to the hope that one day she would see the truth fully. One day, she would stand with me instead of against me. Until then, I would endure his threats. I would gather my strength, and when the time came, I would strike with everything I had. The morning sun poured weakly through the curtains, but it did nothing to ease the tension that gripped the house. Every corner felt poisoned by his presence, every step heavy with unspoken threats. My daughter moved silently, her shoulders slumped, her eyes shadowed with guilt and fear. I watched her closely, wondering how long she could keep carrying his weight before she broke. By mid-morning, he made his move. He came into the living room carrying a neat stack of papers clipped together. His steps were deliberate, his expression smooth, but there was steel in his eyes. He placed the stack on the coffee table with a kind of finality that made my stomach twist. "Today, we settle this," he said flatly. My daughter froze in the kitchen doorway. She looked at the papers as though they were a snake waiting to strike. "What is this?" I asked, my voice calm but laced with suspicion. "Transfer documents," he replied. "All we need is your signature, and everything will be properly arranged. No more arguments, no more confusion. You can finally rest." The arrogance in his voice made my blood burn. He wanted to disguise theft as mercy, coercion as kindness. I already told you, I said firmly. I will not sign anything. His jaw tightened. You are being unreasonable. Look at you. You cannot even walk across the room without leaning on that cane. You need us, and this is the only way forward. You should be grateful we are willing to handle it for you. My daughter stepped forward, her voice trembling. Maybe we should not do this now. He turned on her sharply. Enough. She has delayed long enough. Then he looked back at me, his tone sharpening. You will sign. I leaned back in my chair, my hand steady on the armrest. No. For a moment, silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. His face darkened, his composure cracking. He snatched the papers from the table and shoved them toward me, his voice rising. Do you want to end up back in the hospital? Do you want to lose everything? Because that is what will happen if you keep fighting me. You think you are strong, but you are not. You are one fall away from being useless. The cruelty in his words cut deep, but I refused to let him see it. I held his gaze, unflinching. Better to fall with dignity than stand in chains. His nostrils flared, and his hands trembled with fury. My daughter gasped softly, her face pale as she rushed between us. Stop it, both of you, she pleaded. This is not helping. He glared at me one last time before throwing the papers back onto the table. You think you have a choice, he hissed, but you do not. One way or another, this house will be ours. He stormed out of the room, the door slamming behind him. The silence that followed was suffocating. My daughter turned to me, tears filling her eyes. Mom, I do not know how much longer I can do this. I reached out, taking her trembling hand. You are stronger than you know, and soon, the truth will end this, for both of us. She bit her lip, nodding weakly, but her eyes carried the weight of a woman drowning in conflict. That afternoon, I called Mr. Grant, the lawyer, from the privacy of the backyard. My voice shook as I described what had happened. They put papers in front of me, I said. He tried to force me to sign. Mr. Grant's tone sharpened. Do not sign anything, no matter what threats they make. They cannot legally force you, not without guardianship rights, and based on what you told me, they do not have those. Did you keep the documents? Yes, I replied. They are still on the table. Good. Do not let them out of your sight. Bring them to me as soon as you can. This is exactly the kind of evidence we need to prove coercion. Relief filled me, though it was edged with fear. Every move I made felt like walking on glass. But now I knew I had a shield. I also recorded his threats, I admitted. I have his voice saying, it will all be theirs once the papers are signed. There was a pause on the line. Then, Mr. Grant spoke with certainty. That is more than enough. We can build a strong case with this. Stay strong, Mrs. Harris. They are tightening their grip because they know they are losing control. His words steadied me. I hung up, clutching the phone to my chest. This was no longer a private battle of wills. It was a war with lines drawn, and I was no longer alone. That evening, the atmosphere in the house was suffocating. He avoided me, but I could feel his anger simmering beneath the surface, ready to erupt. My daughter barely spoke, her movements stiff with tension. When night fell, I crept into the living room and retrieved the papers. I slipped them into an old folder and tucked them under my bed, hidden with the recorder. They were my weapons, and I would guard them with everything I had, but I knew he would come looking. The next morning, his rage broke through. He barged into my room without knocking, his eyes blazing. Where are the papers? He demanded. I sat up slowly, meeting his fury with calm. Safe from you. His face twisted. You think you are clever, hiding them. You think anyone will believe your lies over mine. You are a sick old woman clinging to something you cannot keep. His words were venom, but I held steady. I am not the one who lies, and the world will know it. For a moment, he looked as though he might strike me, his hands clenched at his sides, his body trembling with barely contained rage. My daughter appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Stop, she cried. Please, stop. He turned sharply, his voice low and dangerous. This is not finished. He stormed out, leaving me shaken but resolute. My daughter rushed to my side, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I am so sorry, she whispered. I never thought it would go this far. I took her hands in mine, my voice steady. It has to end, and it will. But you must decide where you stand. Her sobs broke my heart, but I held her close, whispering, "You are my daughter. You will always be my daughter. And I will fight." For us both, the days that followed became a dangerous game of silence and suspicion. He searched through drawers when he thought I was not looking. He made calls in hushed tones, his voice carrying anger and desperation. My daughter grew more distant, trapped between loyalty and fear, her spirit weighed down by guilt, but I was no longer afraid. Each threat, each desperate move, only proved what Mr. Grant had said: he was losing control. I kept the papers hidden, the recorder ready, and my notes growing. Every detail mattered, every small piece of evidence another thread that would one day unravel his scheme. One night, as I lay awake, I heard the faint sound of footsteps outside my door, slow, deliberate, lingering. My breath caught as I listened, the shadow of danger thick in the air. The footsteps stopped, then moved away. He was watching me, waiting for me to falter. But he did not realize that every night I grew stronger, every night my resolve deepened. He thought he was closing in on victory. What he did not know was that the walls he had built around me were starting to crack. And when they finally fell, it would be him standing exposed. The tension in the house had grown unbearable. Each day began with silence so heavy, it felt like walking through fog. My daughter barely spoke, her eyes constantly darting between me and him, as though she was bracing for another explosion. And he, simmering with rage, made his presence known with every slammed door. Every sharp word, every calculated step meant to remind me that he was still in control. I thought I had seen the worst of his threats, but I was wrong. One afternoon, while I sat quietly in the living room with a book, I heard voices outside. Not just his voice, but others louder, unfamiliar, male voices. My heart quickened as I stood and peered through the window. A car was parked in the driveway, and two men stood beside him. They were not neighbors. They were not friends. Their posture was stiff, their expressions cold, and everything about them radiated intimidation. The door opened, and they walked in without hesitation, as if the house already belonged to them. My daughter appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale with confusion. "Who are they?" she asked nervously. "They are here to help with the paperwork," he said smoothly, though there was an edge to his tone that betrayed his intentions. One of the men looked at me, his eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up its prey. He gave a small nod. "So this is her." I felt my stomach twist. This was no casual visit. He had brought outsiders to pressure me, to make me bend under the weight of numbers. "What is this about?" I asked firmly. The taller man stepped forward, setting a briefcase on the coffee table. He opened it to reveal more papers, neatly arranged. "We are here to witness and assist with the transfer. It is all very straightforward. Once you sign, everything will be properly handled." My daughter hurried down the stairs, her voice shaking. "Wait, no. This was not the plan. You never said anything about strangers coming here." Her husband gave her a sharp look. "It is necessary. She keeps stalling, and we need to make this official." He turned to me, his smile thin and cold. "You see, this way there will be no confusion. It will all be documented." I could feel my pulse racing, but I forced myself to remain calm. "I am not signing anything." The room went silent. The two men exchanged glances, and then one of them spoke, his voice low but threatening. "It would be better if you did. Fighting this will only make things harder on everyone." My daughter gasped. "You cannot talk to her like that." But her husband silenced her with a glare. "This is what has to be done. She is being stubborn, and stubbornness has consequences." I looked at the papers laid out before me, then at the three men standing against me. My body trembled, but I straightened my back. "I will not sign. Not today, not ever." The taller man leaned closer, his voice a whisper meant only for me. "You are making a mistake. Do you really want to make enemies out of people who can make your life very difficult?" My daughter stepped between us, her hands shaking. "Stop it. You are scaring her. This is wrong." Her husband grabbed her arm and pulled her back roughly. "Enough. Let them do their job." Something inside me snapped. I rose from my chair, gripping the cane tightly for balance, and pointed at the door. "Get out of my house. All of you, now." For a moment, no one moved. Then the taller man laughed softly, shaking his head. "She has spirit, I will give her that. But spirit does not change the law. It changes everything," I replied firmly. "This house is mine. You have no claim to it, and no threats will change that." I turned to my daughter, my voice sharp but pleading. Call Mr. Grant. Right now. Her eyes widened. Mom, do it, I snapped. She fumbled with her phone, dialing quickly. Her husband tried to snatch it from her, but she pulled away, holding it to her ear. Within moments, she was speaking in a rush, explaining what was happening. The men exchanged uneasy glances. One of them muttered, "We did not come here for this." Her husband growled under his breath, "Do not back out now." But it was too late. The mention of a lawyer had shifted the ground beneath them. They gathered their papers quickly, muttering about wasted time, and walked out the door without another word. Her husband slammed the door shut behind them, his face twisted with rage. He turned on my daughter first, his voice seething. "Why did you call him? Why do you always ruin everything?" She stood frozen, tears brimming in her eyes. "Because this is wrong. You are going too far." He turned to me then, his fury like fire. "You think you are clever, calling your lawyer, but you have only made things worse for yourself. Do you know what happens when you make enemies, when you embarrass me?" I held his gaze, unshaken. "Yes, they leave, just like those men did." His jaw clenched, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might strike me. But then he spun on his heel and stormed upstairs, the sound of his footsteps rattling the walls. The house fell silent, broken only by my daughter's sobs. She collapsed onto the couch, her hands covering her face. "Mom, I do not know what to do anymore. He is not the man I thought he was." I sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her trembling shoulders. "You do not have to decide today, but you heard him. You saw what he is willing to do. This will not end unless you choose to stand against him." She wept harder, burying her face against me. "I am scared. If I leave him, what will he do?" I stroked her hair gently, my voice steady. "Then let him fear what we can do. You are not alone. Not anymore." The following day, Mr. Grant arrived at the house. His presence brought a wave of relief I had not realized I needed. He was calm, professional, and his eyes carried the quiet confidence of a man who had seen schemes like this before. He listened carefully as my daughter, and I recounted what had happened. When I showed him the papers and the recorder, he nodded with satisfaction. "This is exactly what we needed," he said firmly. "Coercion, threats, outside pressure, is all here. This is more than enough to move forward legally." My daughter's husband refused to come downstairs during the meeting. He locked himself in his office, his silence louder than words. Mr. Grant glanced at the closed door, and then back at me. "Do not be surprised if he grows more desperate," he warned. "Cornered men lash out. But remember, the law is on your side." His reassurance steadied me. For the first time, I felt that the tide was turning. The walls he had built around me were starting to crumble. And now I had allies standing beside me. As Mr. Grant left, he squeezed my hand firmly. "Stay strong. We are almost there." I watched him go, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. The battle was far from over, but I no longer felt like a prisoner in my own home. I looked at my daughter, who stood quietly by the window, her expression torn. She had seen too much to deny the truth, but fear still held her back. I knew she would have to make her choice soon. And when she did, the man upstairs would discover that all his threats, all his schemes, had led him straight into the trap he thought he had set for me. The days after Mr. Grant's visit were thick with unease. The air in the house felt charged, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. I knew he was plotting, retreating into that office of his, making calls, pacing the floor above me like a wolf circling its prey. Thought my daughter avoided him, slipping around corners and whispering apologies under her breath whenever our eyes met. She wanted to be loyal to me. I could see it, but fear kept her chained to him. It was the same fear I had lived with in silence since coming home from the hospital, but I refused to let it define me anymore. One morning, as I tended the roses in the front yard, I felt eyes on me. I glanced up and saw Mrs. Taylor, our neighbor, from across the street, standing by her mailbox. She smiled politely, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. A curtain shifted in another house down the block. Whispers carried on the wind like smoke. I realized then that he had already started by the afternoon. The evidence was clear. As I went for a short walk down the street with my cane, a man I had known for years barely nodded at me. Another neighbor, usually warm, avoided my gaze entirely. Conversations hushed when I passed. When I returned home, I found him sitting smugly in the living room. "Enjoy your walk?" he asked. I set my cane down with care, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing my unease. Yes, thank you. His smile widened, sharp as glass. Strange how quickly people talk. Word spreads fast around here. My stomach tightened. What word? He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. That you are not well. That you have been confused since coming home. That you are paranoid. It is not hard to convince people when they see an old woman arguing with her family. The cruelty in his voice stung, but it also lit a fire inside me. He was trying to isolate me, to strip away the last layer of protection community offered. Can spread your lies, I said firmly, but the truth has a way of rising, and when it does, it will drown you. For the first time, his smile faltered, though only for a second. He rose from the chair, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. Do not test me, old woman, he said coldly. You will not win. He left the room, his footsteps heavy with frustration. That evening, I sat with my daughter in the kitchen. She had barely touched her dinner, her fork moving food around her plate without lifting it to her mouth. He is turning the neighbors against me, I said softly. You have seen it too, have you not? She nodded miserably. I heard Mrs. Taylor say something at the grocery store. She asked if you were safe to be alone. She thinks you are losing touch. I reached across the table and took her hand. That is what he wants them to believe. He is trying to build a case, to make me look weak. But you know the truth. You have heard the threats. You have seen the papers. Tears welled in her eyes. I do not know how much longer I can take this, Mom. I feel like I am being ripped in two. I squeezed her hand gently. You are stronger than you think, and you do not have to fight alone. She looked at me then, truly looked. And for a moment I saw the girl she used to be, the one who believed in right and wrong, who had laughed in my arms, who had trusted me with her secrets. I want to believe that, she whispered. You must, I replied, because soon you will have to choose, him or me. Her tears fell silently, each drop echoing in the space between us. The next day brought another escalation. A knock at the door startled me, and when I opened it, I found two uniformed officers standing on the porch. Mrs. Harris, one of them asked. Yes, I replied cautiously. We received a call expressing concern for your well-being. Neighbors reported possible confusion and signs of neglect. We need to ask you a few questions. Behind them, I caught sight of him watching from the living room window, his arms crossed, a smirk barely hidden. I invited the officers inside, my heart pounding. They asked simple questions, my name, the date, the president's name. I answered, each clearly, deliberately, refusing to show even a hint of hesitation. Do you feel safe in this home? One of them asked finally. I met his gaze squarely. I do not feel safe with my son-in-law. He has been trying to coerce me into signing away my house. He has brought strangers here to intimidate me, and he has spread lies to my neighbors. I have proof. Recordings, documents, a lawyer. The officers exchanged glances. One of them scribbled notes in a small pad. Do you have this proof available? Yes, I said firmly. Would you like to see it? Before they could answer, he stormed into the room. This is ridiculous, he snapped. She is confused. She has been paranoid since her hospital stay. You cannot take her seriously. The officer held up a hand. Sir, please, let her speak. I retrieved the folder from under my bed and laid it on the table. Inside were the papers he had tried to force on me, along with the small recorder. I played back the clip where his voice dripped with venom, declaring the house would be his, one way or another. The officers listened in silence. When the recording ended, one of them looked at me with quiet respect. Thank you, ma'am. We will make a note of this. Keep these safe, and keep your lawyer involved. They turned to him, their expressions cold. Sir, you may want to be careful with your behavior. Coercion is a serious matter. His face flushed red, but he said nothing. He simply stood there, his fists clenched at his sides, as the officers left. When the door closed, he rounded on me. You think this will save you? You think you can turn everyone against me? I stood my ground. I do not have to turn anyone. You are doing it yourself. He glared at me with a hatred so raw it sent a chill through my veins. Then he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. That night, I lay awake listening to the silence. My daughter had retreated to her room, her sobs muffled through the wall. He had not returned, and the house felt hollow without his heavy presence. But I knew it was only a temporary reprieve. I thought of the neighbors, the whispers, the officers' questions. He was trying to paint me as unstable, But I had fought too hard to let his lies become my truth. I whispered to myself in the dark, a vow as strong as steel. He will not break me. He will not win. And for the first time, I believed it completely. Next morning, my daughter came to me with swollen eyes and trembling hands. "Mom," she whispered, "I think I am ready." I looked at her, my heart pounding. "Ready for what?" "To tell the truth," she said, her voice steadying. "To stand with you. I cannot let him destroy us anymore." Relief and pride washed over me in equal measure. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. "Then we fight together," I whispered. Outside the sun rose, casting light over the house that had been shrouded in shadows for too long. The storm had not ended, but for the first time, I felt the warmth of victory on the horizon. The morning began with a strange quiet, the kind that settles before something irreversible happens. I woke before dawn, my body heavy with exhaustion, yet my mind restless with anticipation. For weeks I had lived under his threats, under the constant weight of his shadow pressing against me. But today felt different. Today, the balance had shifted. My daughter had finally decided. Her whispered words from the night before replayed in my mind. "I am ready to tell the truth." Those words were a spark in the darkness, and I held on to them with everything I had. By mid-morning, Mr. Grant arrived, briefcase in hand, his calm expression hiding the storm of preparation I knew he carried. He sat across from us at the kitchen table, spreading out papers with the precision of a man who had orchestrated battles like this many times before. "Today is critical," he said, his voice steady. "Your daughter's testimony changes everything. It will no longer be your word against his. Together, your voices expose a pattern of coercion and abuse that makes him vulnerable, more than he realizes." My daughter sat stiffly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked younger than she had in years, fear tugging at her, but I could see the determination in her eyes too. She had crossed an invisible line. There was no going back. As we spoke, the front door opened with a bang. His footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor, heavy and fast. He appeared in the doorway, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Mr. Grant's papers spread across the table. "What is this?" he demanded. But Mr. Grant did not flinch. "We are preparing a case. Your behavior has been documented and reported. I suggest you sit down." His face turned crimson, his jaw tight with fury. "You brought a lawyer into my house." I rose to my feet, my voice stronger than I had expected. "This is not your house. It never was. And today, that truth will finally be undeniable." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think you have won something. You are nothing but a frail old woman. And she," he pointed at my daughter, with venom, "she is nothing without me." My daughter's voice shook, but she forced the words out anyway. "I am done letting you control me. I heard every threat you made against my mother. I watched you bring strangers here to scare her. I saw you try to trick her into signing papers, and I am ready to testify to all of it." The silence that followed was deafening. He blinked, as though he could not believe what he had just heard. Then, his face twisted with rage. "You, ungrateful enough," I cut in sharply. "This ends today." Mr. Grant placed a small device on the table and pressed a button. A red light glowed. "You should know, everything said here is now recorded. Any threats, any lies, will be evidence." The trap had been set. He paced the room like a caged animal, his fists clenching and unclenching, his bravado cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. "You will regret this, both of you. Do you think the neighbors believe you? Do you think anyone will side with a confused old woman and her weak daughter?" I stepped forward, cane in hand, my voice firm. "I think the law will side with us. I think the truth will. And more importantly, I think you have underestimated me for the last time." His eyes burned into mine, but I did not waver. My daughter reached for my hand, her grip trembling but strong. Together we stood, side by side, no longer divided. That afternoon, we took everything to the courthouse. Mr. Grant filed the necessary documents, attaching the recordings, the papers, the statements. My daughter swore her testimony before an official, her voice breaking but steadying as she spoke. I watched her grow stronger with every word, shedding the fear that had bound her for so long. Meanwhile, he raged, he called, he shouted, he threatened to show up and tear the place apart, but none of it mattered now. The law was no longer abstract. It was real, and it was closing in on him. By evening, a restraining order was granted. The papers were delivered to the house that night, handed directly to him by an officer at the door. I stood behind the officer as he read the order aloud. You are to vacate the premises immediately. You are prohibited from contacting or approaching Mrs. Harris or her daughter. His face contorted with fury. He looked at me as if he could burn me alive with his stare. This is not over, he hissed. The officer stepped forward. It is, for now. Leave. With no choice, he gathered a few belongings and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I watched from the living room window as he drove away, his car tearing down the street like a wounded animal. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating quiet of fear, but a peaceful stillness. My daughter and I sat together on the couch, the weight of everything sinking in. It is really over, she whispered, as though saying it out loud might make it untrue. I nodded, tears filling my eyes. Yes, it is over. The weeks that followed were a slow process of healing. My daughter began counseling, confronting the years of manipulation she had endured. She cried often, but there was relief in her tears, a cleansing of wounds that had festered too long. As for me, I reclaimed my home piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture the way I liked it. I filled the rooms with fresh flowers, with music, with laughter that had been missing for so long. The neighbors' whispers faded once the truth began to spread. Slowly, cautiously, they returned, with casseroles and apologies, their eyes softer now, their curiosity replaced with understanding. But the greatest change was in my daughter. She stood taller, she spoke louder, she smiled more often, and sometimes, late at night, she would sit beside me on the porch, take my hand, and whisper, "Thank you, Mom, you saved me." I always shook my head. "No, darling, we saved each other." Months later, the court officially confirmed my ownership of the house, free from any claim or challenge. His attempts had collapsed under the weight of evidence and testimony. He never returned, at least not to my door. Rumor had it he had moved to another town, his reputation in tatters. One evening, as I watered the roses, Mrs. Taylor approached. She looked sheepish, her hands twisting nervously. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I believed the wrong story. I should have known better." I smiled gently. Fear makes people believe lies. What matters is the truth, and the truth always finds its way through. She nodded, her eyes moist, and squeezed my hand before walking away. That night, I sat in the living room with my daughter, the glow of a lamp casting warmth over us. She was curled up in an armchair, reading, her laughter breaking the silence every so often as she turned the pages. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. It was the sound of freedom, of survival, of a bond stronger than fear. My journey back from the hospital had begun with emptiness, with betrayal and the loss of the room I had once called mine, but it ended with something greater, the reclamation of not just my home, but my voice, my strength, and my daughter's heart. I had faced deceit, intimidation, and the cold eyes of strangers at my door. I had been painted as weak, as delusional, as a burden, but in the end, I had stood my ground. And as I sat there, my daughter's laughter echoing in the room that was once empty, I realized I had never truly been alone. The house was mine, my dignity was mine, and no one could take that away again.